Look at me, sure. I'm the captain now.
A few moments later.
So we have some monumental updates today that could suggest the Strait of Hormuz is effectively reopened, whether Iran likes it or not. And largely, this is thanks to Iran's own incompetence. We'll explain. Because yesterday we covered two key stories. The first was that Iran's own military could not find, locate, or much less remove their own naval mines that they had placed in the Strait of Hormuz. And what a bunch of geniuses. They put down these mines in order to threaten and exercise control over global shipping. Then it turns out they have no idea where they even put them, meaning hypothetically, they could even be blowing up their own ships in the process. But as you should know by now, these are not actually the brightest people we are dealing with. But I would argue this was more than just another moment that made Iran or the third worldists look stupid. It was a fundamental blow to Iran's international credibility. Let's explain. Because many of these countries right now who are too scared of what Iran's military might do to them in the Strait of Hormuz, right? We literally have a bunch of oil tankers sitting in the Gulf waiting to cross because they're in fear of what the IRGC might do, bombs, naval mines or something, are beginning to realize, oh, this is the paper tiger we were in such fear of? This military who can't even find their own naval mines? Are we sure that Iran actually is this big bad enemy that rivals the United States? That's something we should actually be afraid of. And as a result of that power vacuum, here's the second point. The U.S. Navy has now begun to exercise their own mine clearing opportunities in the Strait of Hormuz. So in other words, because of the power vacuum that Iran's stupidity left behind, now the U.S., with full diplomatic excuses to do so, is saying, okay, we're sending in our own Navy. But it doesn't stop there, because yesterday we also covered how Trump vehemently took the stance now that Iran will not be allowed to control the strait. He will not allow Iran to exercise tolls or anything like that. And it was sort of this question at the time, well, what happens if Iran says no to that? I think you're watching right now, however, because we're realizing the paper tiger that these people are, how would Iran actually have an ability to control the strait? What we just saw is not just mine clearing operations, but further, apparently U.S. naval ships, ladies and gentlemen, and this is the announcement as of today, are now beginning to escort oil tankers through the Strait of Hormuz, and newsflash, the Iranian military has done nothing about it. They've not retaliated. These ships have not paid any tolls or anything like that. And what the U.S. basically just sent the message of in the wake of Iran's lack of credibility and incompetence is that, see, rest of the world, these people don't actually control the strait. And as a result, you're even watching the announcement from some Gulf nations that they are beginning to start into place the resumption of normal operations and normal shipping through the strait. So that's the story as of today, right? Because Iran's stupid you-know-whats couldn't figure out how to get rid of these mines, the U.S. Navy went in, and now that the U.S. Navy is going in, we're also saying, okay, but we're just going to secure the strait for global shipping. And by the way, as it pertains to the coalition of countries, right, the UK, some of our NATO adjacent partners and all that, that are supposed to, they said on paper they're going to be helping out with the Strait of Hormuz once the war is over or whatever. Well, theoretically, this should be the opportunity, although we'll see what they do about that. As usual, as of right now, it is once again the case that America is opening the strait on behalf of all these other countries, which frankly is almost kind of annoying to an extent. However, you know, it's good to show. It's good to show to the rest of the world that, hey, we won. Iran doesn't really have control of the strait. Stop believing this lie. Look what we just did. Look what we're doing here. So that said, we'll get into all of this coverage here today. First, though, do us a favor. If you enjoy our content, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. That's the best way to support our work. It also ensures that you can stay up to date with all the latest news and coverage. And that said, so here was a big announcement from President Trump saying the U.S. has now begun the process that Iran was too incompetent to perform. Notes need to be taken there, okay, in clearing out mines from the Strait of Hormuz. He said the following: the fake news media has lost total credibility, not that they had any to begin with. Because of their massive Trump derangement syndrome, they love saying that Iran is winning, when in fact, everyone knows that they are losing and losing big. Their Navy is gone. Their Air Force is gone. Their anti-aircraft apparatus is non-existent. Radar is dead. Their missile and drone factories have been largely obliterated, along with the missiles and drones themselves. And most importantly, their longtime leaders are no longer with us. Praise be to Allah. Here he goes again. The only thing that they have going is the threat that a ship may bunk into one of their sea mines, which, by the way, all 28 of their mine dropper boats are also lying at the bottom of the sea. We did cover that, by the way, weeks ago, that the U.S. had blown up those very boats that were dropping those mines. We're now starting the process of clearing out the Strait of Hormuz as a favor to countries all over the world, including China, Japan, South Korea, France, Germany, and many others. Incredibly, they don't have the courage or will to do this work themselves. Completely true. I also hope, by the way, to a lot of America's, like the formal NATO in Europe and even the informal NATO, you could say that exists in Asia, that all of our allies are taking notes of this. You know, we didn't have to do this. We could have just let Iran exercise control. So, you know, as you're kind of picking sides, as countries like France are trying to make backdoor deals with Iran over the Strait instead of just joining our side of this, you know, just remember that we're doing this for you, right? And the people who's, oh, the United States is ruining the world or something. Okay. Well, I guess we should not. I guess we should let your ships keep hitting mines in the Strait. I guess we should keep the Strait closed, right? So, you know, that's why even yesterday I said part of me feels like we should just abandon the Strait and see what these other countries do. At the same time, we know how that would be spun, right? The United States surrendered, they lost, etc., etc. So I guess for the political reasons, it is also good. Hey, just show that they actually did lose, because I'm sick of all the propaganda claiming, oh, well, Iran is winning because they're closing the Strait. Okay, well, notice how as of today, about a week or so, a couple days into the ceasefire, that narrative is largely beginning to collapse. And I repeat, thus far, we'll see what happens, but thus far, Iran has done nothing to retaliate against our efforts to reopen the Strait. So I thought these guys had total control, by the way. It turns out they don't. Very interesting. However, empty oil ships from many nations are all headed to the United States to load up with oil. We'll actually cover that probably in our next video. Thank you for your attention to this matter coming from President Donald Trump. And take a listen here to some of these new developments. Apparently, the U.S. military is officially now clearing Iran's mines out of the Strait of Hormuz to ensure safe passage. By the way, on that note about our NATO allies, I'd like to remind everyone, this is something we asked the UK for help with, considering the UK, at least on paper, we're told allegedly is supposed to have really good minesweeping boats. But again, as usual, right, here's America doing all the work for other countries. But, you know, again, I repeat, I'm not attacking Trump for this, because if we have to show all these bad faith actors that actually Iran didn't win, then I guess that's what we got to do. We got to carry the burden for the rest of the world. But anyways, take a listen.
So perhaps those guided missile destroyers will go a long way to opening up the Strait of Hormuz that the president wants to see happen. And a lot of the Iranian delegation is happy to see the vice president here. They think the talks with Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner did not go well before the war in the two separate sets of talks. Some officials I've spoken to, guys, say if Iran's going to be collecting tolls in the Strait of Hormuz, the U.S. Navy should be doing the same thing, stopping Iranian warships and collecting tolls as a way to settle this, but certainly sending those ships through. Some officials think that dealing with Iran is like dealing with the devil, and think this war will not end until Karg Island is seized. Guys?
All right, Lucas Thomason, live for us in Islamabad. A lot of good things there. Lucas, thank you. In adding to Lucas's reporting, just moments ago, President Trump on Truth Social saying in part, we're now starting the process of clearing out the Strait of Hormuz as a favor to countries all over the world, including China, Japan, South Korea, France, Germany, and many others.
Yep, so there's the announcement and a big development. So the USS Frank E. Patterson and USS Michael Murphy, according to Pete Hegseth, transited the Strait of Hormuz, which has not been done by our Navy thus far in this conflict. And so that is sort of a monumental moment, right? And operated in the Arabian Gulf as part of a broader mission to ensure the strait is fully clear of sea mines previously laid down by the incompetent Iranian Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps. And apparently this operation does also involve naval drones that we're basically sending underwater and making sure that we can actually find these things.
Force on the Strait of Hormuz, and we had not heard any reports of any ships, United States ships, going on the strait until now. U.S. CENTCOM writing that the USS Michael Murphy and the USS Frank E. Peterson are searching for any Iranian mines while trying to establish a clear and safe path. Underwater drones will also be used in the coming days. Now, the Strait of Hormuz is considered very treacherous right now, as the New York Times reports Iran may not be able to fully detect where the Iranian regime may have dropped mines. CENTCOM writing, "Today we begin the process of establishing a new passage, and we will share this safe pathway with the maritime industry soon to encourage the free flow of commerce."
Yeah, so I would say there's a couple of important things happening here that we need to understand. First and foremost is that the U.S. Navy is now in the Strait of Hormuz for the first time. And notice how Iran is not doing anything about it. That's very important. They're not retaliating. They're not trying to bomb us or start any fights with us. You could say to an extent that is because of the ceasefire, sure, but it also does send the message. These people, that being Iran, claim that they control the strait, and yet the U.S. Navy is in the strait right now, and notice how Iran's actually not doing anything. It sends a very strong international message. Hey, Iran doesn't control the strait. Stop listening to them. Stop treating them as if they do, because look, we're a hostile combatant with Iran. Right now, we're sailing through the strait. Notice how Iran, who allegedly claims to control this patch of ocean, is not actually doing anything about it. That's first and foremost. But secondly, I would also argue that if Iran wants to sell this idea to other countries that, oh, we're going to charge tolls, and the reason we're going to do that is because if you don't listen to us, if you don't comply, if you don't pay the toll, hey, there's a bunch of naval mines in the ocean, we might blow up your tanker, right? I would argue in order to have the credibility with these countries to actually impose those tolls, first of all, the sea mines have to be there, which if the U.S. is going to clear them, then there is no threat. But then secondly, right, you would think, okay, imagine this. You pay Iran the $1 million toll, you sail through, you get blown up by the sea mine anyway because these geniuses, they're so smart, right? Iranian Revolutionary Guard doesn't even know where the toll actually is. See, that's not a very reliable partner to do business with. And that's the point I would make also about these oil tankers, right? This is the moment where, and we'll see if they try to do anything else, but I would argue, at least de facto, at least informally, Iran lost the control of the strait on this day. And the credibility they, destroyed for themselves when it came to this whole mine clearing situation, which now has given the U.S. Navy the credibility and the reason to send this message to the Strait of Hormuz, right? It's a huge development. And I mean, to a large degree, it's over for Iran. Okay. They're hoping here that they were going to, use the strait as the leverage and say, oh, look, we won to the rest of the world. I'm sure a bunch of the pro-Iran propagandists are still going to spin this and say, oh, no, Iran's really amazing, guys. Trust me. They're so smart. They lost their own naval mines on purpose. That's all part of the grand strategy. It's not, right? And what's now happened as a result of the U.S. coming out and making that announcement, America is declaring its own passage of the strait that you can use and we will protect. As a result, what is now happening is that some oil tankers who are not paying the Iranian tolls are now simply following the U.S. Navy through the strait. And again, for very obvious reasons, that's a big deal. That's the moment where it's kind of the first shot against the bow saying, yeah, Iran doesn't actually have control here. So you can see U.S. Navy surface ships have been crossing the strait today, along with at least 2 oil tankers carrying 4 million barrels of Saudi and Iraqi oil. AIS shows they made it through at 12 knots. No tolls were paid. That's a big deal. It basically shows to all these other countries, all these other oil shipping companies, again, Iran doesn't actually have control. You can see that CENTCOM commander Brad Cooper just announced that the U.S. has begun establishing a new safe passage for commercial shipping through the Strait of Hormuz, and that route will be shared soon to restore confidence and ensure the free flow of commerce. And it's probably going to look something like, I guess, this right here. You can see he said, and I quote, the route will be shared soon to restore confidence and ensure the free flow of commerce. So there you have it, ladies and gentlemen. And here is Trump today, once again asserting, we're opening the strait. We are already opening the strait. And by the way, the strait, now this is actually a big moment in the negotiations, I would argue, because it also kind of shows we might not need a negotiated settlement as it pertains to the strait, right? We can just open the strait anyway and do that without any settlement or negotiation, which Trump addressed as well. But take a listen.
Sweeping the strait. In addition to that, we're negotiating whether we make a deal or not. Makes no difference to me. president because we've won, whether you listen to the fake news or not. You know, it's amazing. Their credibility is down to 13%. The media credibility down to 13%. Think of it. We defeated their Navy. We defeated their Air Force. We defeated their anti-aircraft. We defeated their radar. We defeated their leaders. Their leaders are all dead. And now all we do is we'll open up the strait, even though we don't use it, because we have a lot of other countries in the world that do use it that are either afraid or weak or cheap. I don't know what it is, but we were not helped by NATO, that I can tell you.
Yeah, so look, I certainly don't want to get ahead of anything, but let's not forget Trump's been saying this type of stuff for weeks. He said, we are winning, Iran is losing. Don't worry about the Strait of Hormuz. The strait's going to open itself up anyway. A bunch of people said he was lying, right? Iran is winning. They're controlling the strait. This is such a defeat and a humiliation for America. Well, maybe it was a delayed fuse, but notice how, at least as of this moment, Trump seems like he's being completely vindicated. Iran doesn't actually control the strait, and now that it's beginning to wrap up, or at least there's a current ceasefire, they don't control the strait, right? Now you have ships passing through, not paying tolls, basically following the U.S. Navy. The U.S. Navy is working on their own path. And what is Iran doing about it? Is Iran retaliating? Are they fighting back? Or especially after this whole mine-clearing debacle, are they realizing we couldn't actually control the strait? And by the way, it was never going to be truly sustainable for Iran to control the strait anyway. But, you know, a bunch of people tried to argue, oh, we really lost this war because look at the Strait of Hormuz. And, you know, it's very interesting. It didn't even take a negotiated settlement, at least as of right now. It didn't even take negotiations to get Iran to relinquish the strait. Notice how it just happened anyway, because Iran never truly had control over the strait, right? A large reason, as we talked about before, why these oil tankers are not crossing is pure fear, right? It's an insurance reason because there might just be a little bit of risk. It doesn't mean that Iran actually is this big bad guy. And I repeat, you're noticing that right now. We're further getting the announcement from countries like Qatar as of today, and they may be the first Gulf country here to say this, but they're announcing that maritime navigation will fully resume for all vessels and ships in the Persian Gulf starting on Sunday. This is, of course, following oil tankers being seen following the U.S. Navy through today on Saturday. It does seem to me this is the direction it's headed. And by the way, I would argue that takes a lot of weight off of the negotiations because, sure, we're still trying to do that. But if we can walk away from this without even negotiations and say either way, Iran's not going to control the strait, that's huge leverage we just got right now, right, in terms of getting what we want out of them. And again, this idea that Iran was going to seize the strait or Trump was going to let that happen, I frankly, I just don't think was true, right? People will still try to argue back. They'll say, oh, well, no, Iran still secretly controls the strait because of this reason or that. Okay, say whatever you want. I'm just pointing out, it doesn't seem to me they actually do have control anymore. And what a paper tiger they were, right? All it took was the U.S. Navy to send 2 ships through and show, hey, they don't actually, they're not actually controlling it. See, guys, look, everyone, you're scared of nothing. You're scared of mines, by the way, that they can't find, so we're going to find them for you. So everybody follow America, right? Also, by the way, I would argue America's kind of showing they're in charge right now to the rest of the world. So very important diplomatically, by the way. Hey, NATO countries, hope you're taking notes of that, right? But anyways, there you have it, guys. That said, we'll bring you more updates on the oil situation in our next video. But for now, make sure you hit that like button down below. Subscribe to the channel if you are new. And until next time, God bless and peace.